The sun was sliding low across the New Mexico sky when Gideon Nash realized just how much trouble he was in. His horse had stumbled in the shale, pitching him into a rocky gully where the dust clung to his throat like chalk. 3 men with rifles fanned out along the rim above him, their shadows stretching long and lean against the canyon wall. They weren't lawmen. Gideon could tell by the whiskey swagger in their steps and the cruel grins that came too easily. "Lost little lamb," the tallest one jeered, spitting tobacco juice that darkened the dirt at Gideon's boots. "Surveyor's tools, fancy maps. You're worth more dead than alive." Gideon's ribs ached from the fall, and his revolver lay yards away, useless. He pressed his back against the stone, heart pounding. 28 years on this earth, and he had never felt smaller. Then the canyon shifted. At least, that's how it felt when she appeared. She came from the shadows with the speed of a striking hawk, nearly 6 feet tall. Shoulders broad beneath a buckskin dress, trimmed with bone and feather. Her hair, long and black, snapped like a whip as she moved. In one heartbeat, the leader's rifle shattered against rock, splinters flying. In the next, another man crumpled under her fist, blood spraying from his nose. The third tried to flee. She caught him by the collar as if he were a child and flung him into the dirt. Dust rose around them, and the canyon went still. Gideon stared up at her, too stunned to breathe. She was the most formidable woman he had ever seen. Towering, powerful, alive with a ferocity that felt both terrifying and magnetic. "You hurt?" she asked, her English rough but clear, deeper than most men's voices yet somehow feminine. He shook his head dumbly. She offered her hand. Her palm was calloused, warm. When their skin touched, a spark shot through him so strong he almost gasped. Standing before her, Gideon felt like a scarecrow beside a storm. She was everything he wasn't: strong, confident, dangerous. And yet, when her dark eyes lingered on his, something inside him surged, reckless and unguarded. Why help me?" he managed. Her lips curved into a smile sharp enough to cut. "Maybe I like small things," she murmured. "They break so beautifully." The words should have chilled him, but instead they set his pulse racing. For the first time in his life, Gideon Nash wanted to risk everything on a single, impossible gamble. His voice cracked, but he asked it anyway. "What happens if I touch you?" The woman tilted her head, measuring him like a puzzle. She stepped close, so close he could smell the sage in her hair, feel the heat radiating from her skin. Her smile deepened. "Maybe," she whispered. "We find out." But before his heart could finish its next beat, the distant thunder of approaching horses echoed down the canyon. The echo of horses carried through the canyon like rolling thunder. Gideon stiffened, his eyes darting toward the rim above them. Whoever those riders were, they moved with purpose. Boots struck rock in rhythm, not the careless trot of drifters, but the measured pace of men who hunted. The woman, Ayana, though he did not yet know her name, shifted her stance. In a single motion she scanned the cliffs, hand settling on the knife at her hip. The warmth in her eyes vanished, replaced by a steel that made Gideon's skin prickle. "You need to leave," she said, her voice low but urgent. "I'm not leaving you," he whispered back, surprising himself with the firmness in his tone. "Not after what you just did for me." Her gaze snapped to him, sharp as an eagle's. For a heartbeat, she looked almost offended, then curious. "You barely lived through 3 drunk men. These riders are trained killers. They want my blood. Then they'll have to deal with me, too." The words left his mouth before he could think them through. Foolish. Reckless. but true. Something softened in her face, though only for an instant. She seized his wrist and pulled him toward a narrow fissure in the canyon wall. The space was tight, just wide enough for two bodies pressed close. Gideon's back met cold stone. Her shoulder pressed into his chest, her hair brushing his cheek. He could feel the steady rhythm of her breathing, as if it belonged to him. The riders arrived moments later. 5 of them. They wore cavalry coats faded from sun and dust, their rifles polished, their eyes cold. The leader, a mustached man with a scar down his jaw, swung off his horse and crouched where Ayana had fought. He lifted the shattered rifle stock, turning it in his hands. "She's close," he growled. "Strong enough to break wood with her bare hands. She won't have gone far." Gideon's pulse thundered. The soldiers spread out, checking crevices. Boots scraped closer, each step rattling through Gideon's bones. Beside him, Ayana's muscles coiled tight, ready to spring. "No," Gideon mouthed, squeezing her hand. His own fear was a living thing, but he forced it down. He stepped out of the hiding place with his hands raised. "Don't shoot!" he called, his voice trembling just enough to sell the part. "I'm unarmed." Rifles whipped toward him. The captain narrowed his eyes. Well, what do we have here? A lost lamb?" Gideon swallowed, forcing a quaver into his voice. "She ran north, looked wounded, bleeding from her shoulder. 20 minutes ahead, maybe." The captain studied him for a long, terrible moment, then nodded. "Mount up. We'll catch her." Dust rose as the riders thundered away toward the northern pass. Silence returned to the canyon, broken only by Gideon's ragged breathing. Ayana stepped from the fissure, eyes burning with something between fury and wonder. She walked right up to him until her breath brushed his cheek. "That," she said softly, "was either very brave or very stupid." "Maybe both," he admitted, his knees weak but his voice steady. Her smile flickered again, sharp yet softened by something new. "Little surveyor with a big heart," she murmured, and for the first time Gideon thought she might actually like him. The canyon grew quiet again, but Ayana didn't relax. Her eyes never stopped searching the horizon, her body still taut as a bowstring. Gideon wanted to believe they were safe, yet every instinct screamed otherwise. "Why are they hunting you?" he asked finally. Her jaw tightened. "Because I refuse to be their weapon anymore." Before Gideon could ask what she meant, new voices drifted through the canyon. Not English this time. Apache. The words echoed with authority, laced with anger. Ayana went pale. "My brother," she whispered. "Takakota. He leads our war party." The sound grew closer, 3 riders emerging like spirits from the stone. Gideon had no trouble recognizing her kin. The resemblance was clear, the same height, the same predator's grace. But where Ayana's strength carried balance, Takakota's radiated fury. He reined his horse hard, eyes locking on Gideon. The canyon itself seemed to shudder beneath that gaze. "Ayana," he called in accented English, "step away from the white man." "No," she replied simply, stepping closer to Gideon instead of away. Takakota's face darkened like thunder. "You shame us. You consort with the enemy while our brothers bleed." Ayana's voice was steady, though Gideon saw her hands tremble. "Our brothers bleed because you choose war over wisdom. I choose my own path now." Gideon knew he should stay silent, yet something fierce rose in him, the same fire that had driven him to mislead the cavalry minutes before. "She's not betraying anyone," he said, voice carrying across the canyon. "She's choosing peace over endless killing." Takakota's eyes snapped to him, sharp as spear points. His hand moved to the war club at his belt. Small man speaks big words. Gideon swallowed his fear. Small words from a big heart weigh more than empty threats. One of the other warriors barked a laugh, quickly silenced by Takakota's glare. The Apache leader dismounted, stalking forward like a wolf scenting prey. "You think pretty words will save you, surveyor?" Gideon felt Ayana's hand brush his, a silent warning. Still, he took a step forward. "If you want me gone, you'll have to kill me. But know this, if I die, you'll lose her forever." The canyon air grew heavy. Takakota's war club hung at his side, his rage warring with something deeper. Brotherly love, perhaps, or the faintest seed of doubt. At last he growled, "You win this time, but if you betray her, I'll find you." He mounted his horse with a fluid leap, cast one last searing look, and vanished into the canyon with his men. Only when the echoes faded did Gideon realize he was shaking. Ayana stepped closer, eyes bright with something new, something fragile and dangerous. "That," she said softly, "was the bravest, or stupidest, thing I've ever seen." "Maybe both," Gideon whispered. Her hand rose, warm against his cheek. "Then maybe I'm beginning to like you, little surveyor." Dusk painted the cliffs red as a hearth coal. Ayana led Gideon into a slot canyon so narrow his shoulders brushed both walls. At the end of it, hidden from the open desert, a spring whispered out of rock. She knelt, cupped water, and drank like a woman who trusted few things, and trusted this place most. "This was my mother's," she said, touching the stone rim. "A safe mouth in a country of sharp teeth." Gideon rinsed dust from his face, and for the first time since the cavalry, let his breath even out. "Your brother will come back," he said. "He always does." She didn't look frightened, only tired of being measured by someone else's war. They ate jerky in the hush between wind and night. After a while, she asked, "What do you really do for the railroad, little surveyor?" "Exactly. Measure what can't be argued with," he said. "Grades, spans, the angle a locomotive can take without toppling." He hesitated. "They sent me to find a pass through Eagle Basin, your people's winter ground." Her eyebrow lifted. "So the iron snake takes what the snow keeps safe." "I'm not proud of it," he said. "But maps don't swing a pick or light the dynamite. Men do." She studied him so long he could hear the spring count his heartbeats. "Men follow lines," she said finally. "Maybe you draw better ones." A low churr of metal drifted down the canyon, bits and tack clinking, deliberate and slow. Ayana was on her feet before the sound resolved. "Not cavalry," she whispered. Too quiet. They doused the ember of their small fire and slid into shadow. 3 riders ghosted past the slot's mouth, faces wrapped in scarves, rifles slung not like soldiers, but like men who'd used them in courtless places. The one in the lead wore a bowler hat and a city coat. Pinkerton, Gideon thought, or something meaner hired by men who didn't like sunlight on their money. The riders moved on. Ayana waited, listening with her whole body, then exhaled. "They hunt different game," she murmured. "Us, if they can. Your railroad, if the price is right." Gideon touched the coil of chain at his belt, the surveyor's line he'd recovered where his horse had bolted. A scrap of blue cloth was caught in a link, stiff with old blood. Cavalry. Morrison's kind of men had been here before any map. "Tomorrow," he said, "we take the long ridge and drop into San Miguel. There's a telegraph office. I can wire a friend in Santa Fe. an honest judge. If I testify what the railroad's foreman ordered, if you testify what the army did, maybe we make daylight." "Daylight is a thin blanket," Ayana said, but there was something like approval in her voice. They slept in turns. Near midnight, a stone clicked softly at the canyon mouth. Ayana went tense, then relaxed when she saw it. A small cairn with a white-painted top rock and 2 parallel scratches. "Takakota," she said. "A warning and a choice." "What does it mean?" "He will not hunt us tonight," she said. "But at dawn there's parley at Wolf Table. He wants me to come alone." "Then you won't be alone." "Gideon." "I know," he said. "Your rules. His rules. The desert's rules." He reached into his satchel and pulled out a narrow tape of red silk, the ribbon he used to mark stations on the line. He wrapped it once around her wrist, not tight, not claiming, just visible. "My rule," he said. "We choose our own path." Her mouth softened. "You tie yourself to a storm," she warned. "Maybe I need one." They broke camp before first light, climbing the ridge while the stars still burned. From the high spine, they could see the basin unroll to the horizon. Piñon swales, dry arroyos, the silver thread of the river, and beyond, a thin gray column of smoke where no settlement should be. Ayana followed his gaze. "Not a cook fire?" "No," Gideon said, as the wind carried the sour tang of blasting powder. "A survey crew clearing rock." He felt her hand slip into his, warm, steady, choosing. "Then draw better lines," she said. Wolf Table waited in the pale gold of morning, flat as a judge's palm, and on its edge, 3 silhouettes already stood against the sky. "Parley," Ayana whispered. "Or a verdict," Gideon answered, and they walked toward it together. The mesa rose out of the basin like a ship run aground, its rim a sheer drop of sandstone. Gideon and Ayana reached it as the sun burned away the last of dawn's cool. 3 riders already waited on the flat top, their horses restless in the thin wind. In front of them stood Takakota, Ayana's brother, his war club resting against his thigh. He didn't greet them. His eyes flicked over Gideon, as if measuring a defect in a rifle barrel. "Sister," he said finally, his voice clipped. "You came." Ayana's chin lifted. "You called. I answered." "You were told to return alone." His gaze shifted to Gideon. "Instead, you bring this." Gideon fought the urge to step back. "My name is Gideon Nash," he said, "and I stand with her." One of the other warriors spat. "He draws lines for the iron snake. He does not stand. He destroys." "Enough." Takakota's command silenced them, but his jaw flexed. "Ayana, you shame our people. You walk beside a white man while soldiers burn our homes. You should be here with your blood." "I was," she shot back. "And you used me as bait. Seduction, betrayal, death, always someone else's plan. I am finished being your weapon." The wind tugged at her braids, carrying her words over the mesa. For the first time, Gideon saw doubt flicker in Takakota's dark eyes. He loved his sister, but love had been buried beneath rage too long. "You think he will protect you?" Takakota gestured at Gideon with contempt. "Small as a boy, fragile as rabbit bone." Gideon swallowed hard, but kept his voice steady. "Maybe I can't fight like you, but I can tell the world what happened here. I can make sure your people are seen, not erased. Maps don't just carve land. They tell stories. I can tell yours." That made Takakota pause. Stories mattered. More than rifles. More than raids. They lived longer than warriors did. But the pause shattered when hoofbeats thundered up from the basin. A new column of riders climbed the switchback trail, dust rising around them. Cavalry blue coats, U.S. soldiers. At their head, a hard-eyed officer with a scar down his cheek. "Morrison," Gideon breathed. Ayana stiffened. "The butcher," and Takakota's hand flew to his war club. "You led them here," he snarled at Gideon. "No," Gideon snapped. "They've been tracking us since the canyon. Morrison doesn't care about lines or tribes. He wants silence." The officer's voice carried up the slope. "Ayana, Gideon Nash, by order of Colonel Morrison, you are under arrest for treason and aiding hostiles. Surrender, or we fire." Takakota's warriors shifted uneasily. They had rifles, but the soldiers below outnumbered them 3-1. The mesa was a trap, high ground with no way out, but the trail already blocked. Ayana stepped forward, her voice like flint. "If you want us, Morrison, come and take us." The colonel's smile was thin as a knife. "Gladly." The soldiers began dismounting, forming lines to advance up the trail. Gideon's chest tightened. "We can't hold this," he whispered. Takakota looked at his sister. "You chose your path. Now we all bleed for it." Ayana met his gaze. "No, we bleed together, or not at all." For the first time, Gideon saw the possibility of something different. Warriors and surveyors, siblings and outcasts, forced by the colonel's cruelty to fight side by side. He tightened his grip on Ayana's hand. "Then we stand," Gideon said, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. "All of us, right here." Ayana's eyes shone, fierce and proud. Takakota hesitated, then raised his war club high. The sound carried across the mesa like thunder. His men answered with a chorus of battle cries. Below, Morrison's soldiers leveled their rifles. The mesa was about to explode. The first shot cracked like lightning against stone. Then came the thunder, dozens of rifles firing at once. Bullets whined off the sandstone rim, spraying chips into Gideon's face. He threw himself flat, pulling Ayana down beside him. Takakota roared, his voice carrying above the din, and his warriors returned fire. The mesa erupted with smoke and echoes, the air thick with the acrid smell of powder. Gideon scrambled to his knees, fumbling with a discarded rifle. One of Ayana's men shoved into his hands. It felt heavy, unfamiliar, but his fingers found the trigger anyway. He aimed low at the advancing soldiers, more to slow them than to kill. His shot cracked, the recoil nearly knocking him backward. A trooper screamed and tumbled down the slope. Gideon's stomach lurched, but Ayana's hand steadied him. "Good," she said fiercely. "Again!" The soldiers kept climbing in disciplined lines, their bayonets flashing. Morrison's scarred face glared from below, his saber raised like a beacon. "Push them back! No prisoners!" Takakota hurled a spear that struck true, toppling another trooper. He turned to Gideon, his dark eyes blazing. "Surveyor, mark their path!" It took Gideon a second to understand. He scanned the slope, narrow, winding, with a loose section of rock held by nothing but dry roots. He pointed. "There, that ledge. If it comes down, it blocks the trail." Ayana didn't hesitate. She sprinted across the mesa, bullets snapping at her heels, and jammed the butt of her rifle into the weak spot. Gideon's heart seized as the sandstone cracked, groaned, then collapsed in a roaring avalanche. Dust billowed as half the trail vanished, carrying 3 soldiers screaming into the basin below. The rest were forced to halt, pinned against the rockfall. Cheers erupted from Takakota's men, but Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. "Cannons!" Gideon's blood turned cold. On the far ridge, teams of soldiers wheeled small field guns into position. The sunlight glinted off bronze barrels, aimed squarely at the mesa top. Takakota swore in Apache. "They'll turn this mountain into fire." "We can't stay here," Gideon said, coughing on the dust. "They'll bury us alive." Ayana's jaw clenched. "Then we go down fighting." "No," Gideon snapped, surprising both of them. "Not fighting. Outthinking." His eyes scanned the battlefield, searching for something, anything, to shift the odds. Then he saw it. The dry brush piled in a gully on the mesa's far side. "If we light it," he said quickly, "the smoke will cover our retreat. They can't fire what they can't see." Takakota stared at him, incredulous. "You would burn the mesa?" "Better smoke than blood," Gideon shot back. Ayana's eyes met her brother's. After a long heartbeat, Takakota gave a single nod. "Do it!" Together, Gideon and Ayana dragged smoldering torches from the campfire pit and hurled them into the brush. The flames caught fast, leaping skyward, sending black smoke rolling across the mesa. The soldiers below shouted in confusion, their aim broken. Morrison cursed, his saber slashing the air. The cannons thundered anyway, but their shells screamed blind into the haze, exploding harmlessly on empty rock. "Now!" Ayana cried. She seized Gideon's arm and pulled him toward the narrow back trail, Takakota and his warriors covering their retreat. Through the smoke and fire, Gideon caught one last glimpse of Morrison, his scarred face twisted with fury. The colonel raised his saber in oath. "Run, Nash! Run! But I will find you!" The mesa quaked under another cannon blast, but Gideon forced himself forward, stumbling down the hidden path with Ayana beside him. Behind them, Wolf Table vanished into a storm of fire and smoke. They hadn't won. Not yet. But they had survived, and survival meant the fight was far from over. Smoke thinned to blue ribbons as they dropped off the mesa's hidden spine and into the slot canyon. The world narrowed to red walls and breath. Every footfall sent echoes skittering ahead like scouts in the dark. "Left fork," Gideon said, pointing past a choke of boulders. "The right pours into a box end." Takakota grunted, half challenge, half respect. "You speak our land like a man born to it." "I measured it," Gideon answered, not proud. Different kind of knowing. Behind them, the cannons boomed again, distant now, but the sharper sound that followed wasn't artillery. It was the hard, efficient cadence of cavalry moving at speed. Morrison had sent his best riders down the long wash that braided into the slot. They'd try to cut the fugitives off where the canyon opened to the flats. Ayana pulled a young warrior, Hosa, forward, his leg bloody from shrapnel. "He can run," she said, but Gideon saw the tightness in her jaw. "Not fast enough," Gideon replied. He slung Hosa's arm over his shoulder. The young man winced, then set his teeth and kept pace. Ayana took point, moving with sure-footed grace over stone shelves, slicked by centuries of storm water. Above, a thin river of sky stitched the walls together. The canyon breathed cool and damp. They reached a pour-off, a 12-foot drop, polished to glass. Takakota swore, "We waste time here." Gideon scanned the limestone lip, found an old cottonwood root knotted into the face. He stripped his bedroll, tore it into a sling, and braced it with a broken travois pole. "Lower him," he said, climbing down first. Ayana anchored the makeshift rope around her waist, thighs flexed, shoulders corded. Hosa descended to Gideon's waiting arms, then the others. Float after, cat silent, competent. A bugle's thin ribbon floated down canyon. "They're pushing the wash," Ayana said. "Fast." Gideon chewed his lower lip. The slot kinked ahead into a dogleg. Good cover. Bad for speed. He knelt, pressed his palm to the sand. Fine grains trembled against his skin. Not from horses, from water. He looked up. The sky above the mesa had turned the color of steel. Far upstream, the storm they'd smelled the day before must have emptied itself over the high country. Somewhere beyond their sight, a wall of water had stood up and started walking. "Flash flood," he said. "We've got minutes." Takakota's eyes flicked to the narrow scars 3 feet up the canyon walls. Old flood lines. He tightened his jaw. "We climb?" "Not in time," Gideon said. "But we can make the water choose them." He sprinted ahead to the dogleg, where a fallen slab created a low, natural dam on the left, just enough to redirect a surge. Gideon jammed his pole and Hosa's spear into the gravel seam, prying, shifting, rolling rock. Ayana joined him without a word, forcing her shoulder against stone. The slab groaned, slid, and settled at an angle, opening their side and narrowing the opposite bend. "Back!" Gideon shouted. They scrambled to a shelf 5 feet up. The first tongue of muddy water licked around the corner and burst past, growing from a trickle to a charge in seconds. It slammed into the angled slab and knifed hard right, toward the wash the cavalry would be using. "Now move!" Ayana snapped, already dropping from the shelf. They ran low along the inner bank as the flood thickened, the canyon speaking in a deeper voice. Behind them, distant shouts rose bright with panic. The wall of water had found Morrison's riders. At the mouth of the slot, the world opened fast into a broken amphitheater, pocked with juniper and basalt. A seep darkened the sand. A drink if you were patient. They allowed themselves one lungful of stillness. Takakota turned to Gideon. In the warrior's gaze was something new. "You turned stone and water into weapons," he said, "without taking a life." Gideon shook his head. "Water took them. I just pointed." Ayana touched his shoulder, a brief, grounding press. "You pointed us away from death, too." From the flats came the clatter of regrouping soldiers, angry, soaked, humiliated, alive enough to continue the hunt. Morrison didn't quit. Not when pride bled. "We can't outrun them to the settlements," Gideon said, scanning the horizon. "But we can outpace them sideways." "And sideways?" Takakota frowned. Gideon pointed to a rib of land etched with old terraces and a ghostly bell tower just visible beyond, a crumbling adobe cross against the sky. "San Cristóbal Mission. There's a cistern under the sacristy and a loft with one stare-down approach. If we get there first, we pick the ground." Ayana's mouth curved. "You've measured that, too?" "Long time ago," he swallowed. "When I still believed maps were harmless." Takakota considered, then nodded once. "We take your third path, surveyor." They moved, angling across the wind-scored flats, keeping low where cholla and sage offered cover. The bugle sounded again behind them, closer, disciplined, furious. Gideon didn't look back. As the sun slid west, the mission's broken bell tolled once in the wind, an iron ghost. Ahead lay stone, shadow, and a single narrow stair to a final stand. Behind, the floodwater darkened the wash, and Morrison's oath rode hard on the evening air. They had stolen one more hour. They would have to make it enough. The adobe walls of San Cristóbal Mission rose from the flats like a bone picked clean by time. Its bell tower leaned, cracked, but the iron tongue still hung. The setting sun painted the ruin in blood and gold, a fitting stage for what was coming. Gideon Nash led the wounded inside. The air was cool, thick with the smell of dust and bat guano. Ayana checked the cistern, dry at the bottom, but its stone rim still solid. A shelter if they needed to hide the women. Takakota walked the perimeter, measuring sight lines. He pointed to the stairwell spiraling up the bell tower. One way up. Good choke point. They'll come hard, Gideon said, but we make them bleed for every step. The cavalry arrived just after nightfall, their torches licked at the mission walls, shadows dancing high. Colonel Morrison rode at their head, his voice carrying like iron across the courtyard. Give up the woman and the surveyor, and I might let the rest of you live. Ayana stepped onto the tower balcony, her silhouette framed by the broken cross. Her voice cut sharp as a hawk's cry. You already took my family. You'll take no more. Gunfire erupted, sparking stone. The Apache warriors answered with arrows and captured rifles. Gideon fired carefully from the bell tower, each shot placed like a surveyor's stake. He wasn't the fastest, but his eye was true, and soldiers dropped from saddles in the torchlight. Morrison dismounted, furious, shouting orders. His saber caught the fire glow, a general's toy in a butcher's hand. Burn them out, he roared. Oil jars arced against the walls, flames leaping. The old adobe held, but smoke clawed at the lungs of those hiding inside. Takakota rallied the young warriors. Hold! Every hour we live is another nail in Morrison's coffin. His war cry split the night, answered by the deep boom of the mission's bell. Gideon had swung it with his rifle stock, the sound rolling across the desert like thunder, a signal, a challenge. The fight turned desperate. Soldiers breached the courtyard. Steel against stone, Gideon jammed his rifle butt into a man's jaw, stumbled, nearly fell. But Ayana was there, pulling him upright, her knife red in the torchlight. For a heartbeat, their eyes locked. Not fear, not even desperation. Belonging. Then the distant bugle sounded again. Different, sharper, official. From the north, Federal troops rode in hard, banners snapping. Morrison froze. His men wavered, confused, caught between two authorities. Sergeant Reynolds thundered into the courtyard with bluecoats at his back. His voice was iron. Colonel Morrison, you are relieved of command. Drop your weapon. You stand accused of murder, theft, and treason. Morrison's face twisted. He lunged, saber raised, not at Gideon, but at Ayana. Gideon moved without thought. One shot. Close. Final. The saber clattered to stone, Morrison falling at Ayana's feet, blood darkening the dust where priests once prayed. Silence fell, broken only by the groan of the old bell swinging in the smoky wind. Reynolds dismounted slowly, eyes grave. It's over. Ayana's gaze lingered on Gideon, then shifted to her brother, who stood with blood on his hands, but his people alive. No, she said softly. It begins now. A new path. One we choose. The bell tolled once more, long and hollow, marking not just the end of a battle, but the start of a life neither Gideon nor Ayana had ever imagined.